Eleanor Vance cherished the quiet hum of Maplebrook, Connecticut. Her days, a carefully cultivated rhythm of architectural design work from her home studio, tending to her vibrant garden, and evening walks with her husband, Mark, were her sanctuary. Their colonial revival home, nestled on a generous half-acre lot, was her canvas. Every rose bush meticulously pruned, every azalea perfectly placed, reflected a life built on order and beauty. It was 2009, and the world outside often felt turbulent, but within her picket-fenced haven, Eleanor found peace. Mark, a software engineer, often remarked on her ability to create such serene spaces, a counterpoint to the chaotic lines of code he navigated daily. Their next project was a small, tasteful addition to their detached garage, intended to house Mark's expanding home office. It was a well-thought-out plan, meticulously drawn by Eleanor herself, adhering to every setback and coverage regulation she'd painstakingly researched. They were model citizens, always playing by the rules. Their neighbors, mostly families who'd lived in Maplebrook for decades, contributed to this sense of community. Even Brenda Hayes, who lived 2 houses down, with her perpetually smiling face and an uncanny ability to appear whenever Eleanor was out in her garden, seemed a part of the tapestry. Brenda, always in impeccably pressed linen, would coo over Eleanor's hydrangeas, compliment her perfectly edged lawn, and often drop off a plate of her famous lemon bars, all while delivering a carefully curated digest of neighborhood happenings. Eleanor found her a little overbearing, a touch too sweet, but ultimately harmless. The permit application for the garage addition went in during early autumn. Weeks turned into a month, then 2. The usual turnaround time had long passed. Each phone call to the Maplebrook Planning Department yielded vague answers. Processing delays, increased workload, some minor clarifications needed regarding neighbor concerns. Eleanor, initially patient, grew frustrated. She and Mark had followed every guideline, consulted the zoning maps, and even anticipated potential issues. What neighbor concerns could there possibly be? One crisp December afternoon, while at the local hardware store, Eleanor ran into Mrs. Henderson, an older woman known for her keen observations and directness. Mrs. Henderson, after a brief exchange about the coming frost, leaned in conspiratorially. "Heard Brenda Hayes has been quite busy lately," she whispered, her eyes twinkling with knowing amusement. "Seems she's got a lot to say about everyone's property, particularly yours. Shame that." Eleanor's blood ran cold. She dismissed it as idle gossip, but a seed of doubt had been planted. Days later, a thick envelope arrived from the Maplebrook Zoning Enforcement Office. Not a permit, but a formal letter, its tone stiff and bureaucratic. Eleanor's hands trembled as she opened it. The letter detailed a series of official complaints filed against her property. Excessive shrubbery obscuring sidewalks, it read, referencing her prize-winning viburnum hedge. Unauthorized shed placement, pointing to the small, perfectly compliant garden shed tucked behind her garage. Potential zoning violations regarding lot coverage, a veiled accusation about her entire landscape, and most outrageously, nuisance dog barking. Eleanor didn't even own a dog, though her elderly terrier mix, Charlie, a rescue with a perpetually anxious disposition, would occasionally let out a sharp bark at the mailman. The complaints were anonymous, attributed only to concerned citizens. But then, a specific line caught her eye. Concerns about the visual impact of the large azalea bush near the front porch, potentially exceeding height restrictions. It was the very azalea Brenda had admired just last week, commenting on its vibrant crimson bloom, the very azalea she had gently touched with a gloved hand, her smile wide and seemingly genuine. The realization hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Brenda, it had to be her. The compliments, the lemon bars, the saccharine smiles, all a facade, a cruel mockery while she systematically tried to dismantle Eleanor's peace behind her back. The humiliation was profound, the betrayal deeply personal. It wasn't just the bureaucratic hassle, it was the insidious nature of the attack, the duplicity that made her question every pleasant interaction she'd ever had with her neighbor. Her home, her sanctuary, now felt exposed, violated, no longer safe. Mark found her later that evening, staring blankly at the complaints, tears silently streaming down her face. "It's Brenda," she whispered, her voice raw. "She's been smiling at me, bringing me baked goods, all while trying to tear down everything I've built." Mark, usually calm and rational, was furious. He urged her to confront Brenda, to demand an explanation. Eleanor, still reeling, felt a burning rage, but also a deep sense of despair. Her initial reaction was to curl inward, to retreat. She became obsessive, constantly scanning her property for perceived imperfections, convinced every rustle in the bushes was a new complaint taking root. The garage addition, a symbol of their future, was put on indefinite hold. The joy she once found in her garden was replaced by a gnawing anxiety. She followed Mark's advice, steeling herself for a confrontation. She approached Brenda's house, the same one where she'd always been met with such warmth. Brenda, watering her own immaculate petunias, turned with her usual wide smile. Eleanor, her voice trembling, laid out the facts. Brenda's reaction was a theatrical masterpiece. Her eyes widened, her hand flew to her mouth in feigned shock. "Eleanor, darling, how could you think such a thing? Me? Oh no, absolutely not, I'd never." She even managed to squeeze out a few glistening tears, claiming she was devastated that Eleanor would suspect her. "I'm sure it's just some misunderstanding. Perhaps those new people down the street? Or that grumpy Mr. Davies?" Brenda even offered to help Eleanor navigate the town bureaucracy, a viper offering to guide its victim through a maze of its own making. This gaslighting, the sheer audacity of Brenda's denial, extinguished the last flicker of Eleanor's despair and ignited something far colder, far more resolute. This wasn't just about anonymous complaints. It was about a fundamental breach of trust, a calculated act of cruelty. Eleanor withdrew, but this time not in defeat. She spent a week in a silent, seething fury, barely sleeping. Then, one morning, she woke with a chilling clarity. She wasn't just a landscape architect. She was an architect of spaces, an interpreter of rules, a woman who understood the intricate dance between design and regulation. Brenda had used the system against her, hiding behind its anonymity. Eleanor would do the same, but with surgical precision, with irrefutable evidence, and with a mastery of the very codes Brenda had so carelessly invoked. She started her deep dive into Maplebrook's zoning ordinances. She became a fixture at the town hall, a quiet, unassuming woman in the corner, poring over dusty binders and microfiche. She spent hours, then days, then weeks, immersing herself in every obscure bylaw, every amendment, every historical variance. The clerks, initially wary, grew accustomed to her diligent presence. She learned about setback requirements for accessory structures, height restrictions for fences, lot coverage calculations, noise ordinances, even the precise definition of nuisance vegetation. Her landscape architecture background gave her an advantage. She understood the language, the intent, and the loopholes. What she discovered was a slow, dawning realization of Brenda's hypocrisy. Beneath Brenda's perfectly manicured facade, there were minor, almost imperceptible, yet legally actionable, violations. Her charming, older colonial had a fence at the back of her property that, upon cross-referencing with historical permits and current regulations, was 4 inches too tall. Her recently installed, aesthetically pleasing stone patio extension encroached just over the allowable lot coverage by a fraction of a percent, a detail easily missed by a casual observer, but glaringly obvious to someone with Eleanor's newfound expertise and tools. She used Google Earth's historical imagery, a relatively new feature then, to establish dates, cross-referencing it with town records, and the placement of Brenda's meticulously painted, oversized garden shed. Just 3 inches over the rear setback line, a detail that would have gone unnoticed had Eleanor not been meticulously measuring and comparing. Furthermore, Brenda, who often complained about the slightest disturbance, hosted regular, boisterous garden parties, often stretching well past the town's permitted noise hours, something Eleanor had always ignored, but now filed away. Eleanor meticulously documented everything. She took dated photographs from her own property and from public easements using a high-resolution digital camera. She created precise diagrams, marking dimensions and distances. She photocopied relevant sections of the zoning code, highlighting the specific violations. She wasn't driven by petty anger anymore. It was a cold, calculated pursuit of justice. She would not just fight back. She would dismantle Brenda's carefully constructed world of false propriety, piece by agonizing piece. Her revenge wasn't a sudden explosion, but a series of carefully orchestrated maneuvers, a legal siege. Phase 1. The gradual squeeze. Eleanor began by filing anonymous complaints mimicking Brenda's tactics, but with a crucial difference. Eleanor's complaints were irrefutable, backed by solid evidence. The first target, the fence. A detailed letter, complete with photographs, ordinance citations, and even a satellite image indicating the property line, landed on the zoning enforcement officer's desk. Within weeks, Brenda received a polite but firm letter from the town, informing her of a minor fence height violation and requesting a plan for remediation. Brenda was flustered. She dismissed it as a clerical error or a jealous neighbor. She had to slightly lower a section of her fence, a small but irritating expense and effort. Next, the patio extension. Another anonymous, meticulously documented complaint detailing the lot coverage violation. Again, a letter arrived for Brenda. The enforcement officer, now familiar with the thoroughness of these concerned citizen reports, couldn't ignore them. Brenda was forced to apply for a variance or remove the offending section. She fumed, convinced some busybody was targeting her, completely unaware it was Eleanor, observing her every frustrated move from 2 houses down. Phase 2. Escalation. Brenda, irritated by the town's growing scrutiny, began to openly complain to other neighbors about the anonymous harassment. This played right into Eleanor's hands. Eleanor then submitted a complaint about the shed setback. This was a more significant violation, potentially requiring Brenda to move the entire structure, a costly and disruptive undertaking. This time, the Zoning Enforcement Office sent a more severe letter, indicating a potential fine and a mandatory appearance before the Zoning Board of Appeals if the issue wasn't addressed promptly. Brenda was incandescent with rage. She painted herself as the victim, loudly proclaiming her innocence and how she was being unfairly targeted. Phase 3. The public hearing. The shed issue escalated to a formal hearing before the Maplebrook Zoning Board of Appeals. Eleanor, dressed discreetly, attended, sitting quietly in the back row, a seemingly casual observer. Brenda, red-faced and agitated, presented her case, claiming the shed had been there for years, a lie Eleanor knew, having seen the recent installation on Google Earth's historical images, and that this was all malicious harassment. During her testimony, the board, prompted by earlier anonymous tips Eleanor had carefully provided, emails with links to relevant bylaws and photographic evidence, sent from an untraceable public Wi-Fi hotspot, brought up the patio extension and the fence height, asking Brenda to explain why there were multiple, seemingly unrelated, violations on her property. Brenda stammered, contradicted herself, and appeared increasingly untrustworthy. Her carefully constructed image of perfection was cracking under the public scrutiny. Eleanor watched, a quiet, grim satisfaction settling within her. Phase 4. The final blow. After Brenda's public humiliation at the ZBA meeting, Eleanor knew the time was right for the final, decisive blow. This time, she didn't file anonymously. This time, the complaint was under her own name, and it wasn't about zoning, but about a quality of life issue. Noise. The complaint detailed Brenda's consistent violations of Maplebrook's noise ordinance during her frequent weekend garden parties. Eleanor provided specific dates, times, and, crucially, sworn witness statements from 3 other neighbors who, fed up with Brenda's loud music and boisterous revelry, but too timid to act themselves, were willing to corroborate Eleanor's claims. It was undeniable. The cumulative weight of the zoning violations, the public spectacle at the ZBA, and now a formal, named complaint about noise, irrevocably shattered Brenda's standing in the community. The consequences were swift and severe. Brenda was not only fined for the noise violations, but the zoning board mandated she bring all her property into full compliance. This meant she had to hire a contractor to move her shed, a significant expense and landscaping upheaval, partially demolish her unpermitted patio extension, and rebuild sections of her fence. Her attempts to appeal were met with firm resistance from a town hall weary of her defiant stance. Her reputation in Maplebrook was in tatters. The smiling, sweet neighbor was exposed as a hypocrite and a nuisance. Neighbors who had once accepted her lemon bars now offered curt nods, avoiding eye contact. Her attempts to mend fences, no pun intended, were met with polite but firm distance. She became isolated, a pariah in her own meticulously curated world. Eleanor and Mark finally received their permit for the garage addition without a single hitch. The process was smooth, the approvals swift. As the construction crew broke ground, Eleanor stood in her garden, watching the progress, the scent of freshly turned earth filling the air. There was no triumphant gloating, no celebratory outburst. Instead, a quiet, profound sense of justice had settled over her. She had not sought to destroy Brenda, but to restore balance, to defend her home and her peace using the very rules Brenda had so maliciously weaponized. The satisfaction wasn't in the other's downfall, but in her own resilience, in her meticulous pursuit of truth through the labyrinthine details of zoning codes. She returned to her perfectly manicured garden, her sanctuary reclaimed, the meticulously placed azalea blooming in vibrant crimson, a silent testament to the quiet power of knowledge and the enduring strength of a woman scorned, who found her voice not in shouting, but in the unwavering precision of the law. The hum of Maplebrook's quiet life resumed, but with a new, subtle shift in its rhythm, a testament to the fact that even in the most idyllic suburban settings, beneath a neighbor's brightest smile, the seeds of conflict can be sown, and the sharpest replies can be found in the overlooked pages of a town's zoning ordinances.